All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to a new episode. We've got Reig McConnell here. Did I say your last name right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
McConnell,
good.
yeah.
I've never actually said your last name. All right. He is one of our coaches at Priority Health and Fitness. He's one of our coaches with the More Muscle Barbell Club. But he also has his own training company, coaches one-on-one with some really talented athletes.
Yeah.
But a lot of those athletes are youth athletes. And that's why I drug you in here today to sit in front of this little light and these microphones to talk about the importance of, training as a youth athlete. So starting off, just for some background,
Yeah.
kind of what drove you to start or to really focus in on youth athletes?
Yeah, so it was kind of an evolution of my passion for sports. So I grew up playing sports. I coached. As soon as I graduated high school, I knew I wanted to get into coaching. So I started coaching rec football when I was 17 years old. This is way back 2004. I started coaching rec football. I left for the Army. In the Army, I was in charge of what we call remedial PT. So the folks that couldn't pass a PT test, I got to help them get ready for their PT test. So I would PT in the morning, I would help them at lunch, then I would go work out on my own
Good grief.
in the evening. So a
Yeah.
lot of fitness, a lot of learning how to train people. I got out of the military, went right back into coaching, started coaching rec sports again. From there, got into coaching high school sports and really started falling in love with combining the two and running weight rooms.
Okay.
So I was running weight rooms for high school programs, for the football programs, track, baseball, cross, any sport you can think of that would come to the weight room, started doing that. My actual very first personal training clients, which is wild now because they were 14 at the time. They just turned 26 the other day.
Good grief.
Yeah, so feel a little aged there.
Yeah.
But their mom said, "Hey, Reg, like you coach sports and you run the weight rooms. Would you be interested in personal training the girls?" They had 4 daughters.
Yeah. 4 daughters.
Quadruplets.
Whoa, really?
4 daughters, yeah,
Good
quadruplets. Awesome athletes. So I kind of lucked out on the
neat.
first one. So I started personal training them one-on-one, and it kind of grew from there. My passion for personal training, I got my certifications. Things kind of grew from there this wasn't my full-time gig. This is my side job, something I really loved, but I was working full-time at a different job. As that job progressed, I had less time for team sports and coaching.
Okay.
I found I was able to get my fix of young athletes and working with high school age athletes through one-on-one training. So I was still able to keep some of those kids through training.
Awesome.
And it just kind of evolved from there. A few years back, I decided to start my own company, go full-time with personal training. And the one thing that I've been doing constantly really was working with the younger athletes. So that was always a big cornerstone in my business. And it still continues to be.
So with that, really focusing on youth athletes, is that something that just kind of developed as a passion, or you noticed it when you were growing up and in sports? And I mean, I know I noticed it that, okay, this training, my whole life of training really helped me progress in sports. Was it the same for you, like wanting to pass it on? Or did it just kind of fall in your lap?
It's funny. You're gonna laugh at this. My buddies die laughing, making fun of me that I'm a successful personal trainer and coach now because I hated the weight room in high school.
Really?
They would literally show up at my door and like have to drag me to the car to get me into the weight room. I hated it. I wasn't good at it.
Okay.
I was good at sports. So I played sports, football, wrestling. I was on the
Yeah.
lacrosse team. What I really played, but I was on the team one year. I love the sport and I was naturally athletic. I was able to get by just with my athleticism and just sheer willpower.
Sure.
But I was not good in the weight room. In high school I weighed over 200 pounds. Couldn't bench press 225.
Yeah.
Never squatted. Didn't know how to deadlift. Didn't know how to do any of those things.
Wow.
And I think back, I'm like, man, how much of a better athlete would I have been if I had these tools in my box? If I was stronger, if I was faster, would things have been a little bit different for me as an athlete? That ship has sailed a long time ago. But the thing that I really enjoy is working with these young athletes and helping them meet their maximum potential or getting them to a spot where they feel comfortable with it. And it's
Awesome.
such a great thing. I think that we need to put more of an emphasis as schools move away from physical education. There's less funding for that in public schools. Some kids are less active. Showing kids that, exercise, working out, working with a coach, a trainer, being in the weight room, it's nothing to be scared of. It should be fun and enjoyable.
Yeah.
But I do it, or I kind of focused and honed in on this because it's something that I'm able to do well. A little bit about me: I went to school for education for the majority
I
of.
didn't know that.
Yeah, so I
Wow.
wanted to be a high school English teacher.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I could see that.
yeah, and then I
could
realized,
see that.
maybe the school system wasn't for me at the time, so I shifted my focus. I ended up getting my English degree with a focus on writing,
Okay.
but I still had that educational background. I've been working with kids my whole life, so I'm able to understand how these athletes think, maybe to relate with them a little bit more. When I started coaching, I was younger,
Yeah.
23. It was not that much older than the seniors, but just old enough to still be able to say like, "Hey, I'm in charge. Like we can be cool, but like I'm still your coach.
Sure.
You have to put."
Yeah.
I was able to be relatable to the kids, and understand not just how they move and how they grow and how we get stronger, but what they're thinking,
Yeah.
which is such a big part of coaching youth athletes that I think a lot of people miss, because you sometimes get the people who are just stud athletes or really strong, and they expect every stud athlete to be really strong or
Yeah.
every really strong person to be a stud athlete, and it doesn't always work like that.
Okay.
But also being able to understand what kids are going through. My wife is a tutor. She works for a tutoring company. So she works with high school kids as well, tutoring
Okay.
SAT, ACT prep stuff. So we kind of talk about how these kids, and you
Just a
often hear,
house full of teachers.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. She's a converted. She used to be an elementary school teacher.
Okay.
But the thing that people forget is people are like, oh man, if I go back to high school, if I go back to middle school, do it all over again, I'd do it. I love it. And people forget how dreadfully awkward some of those moments were, how tough it was being a kid,
Yeah.
not having a car, not having a ride, having to rely on your parents, trying to figure yourself out, and just being able to understand mentally and psychologically where, or emotionally even, like where a kid is. That goes into, you take that training with adults as well, but it's really difficult because so many adults look at a kid and say, you're a kid, you're a child.
Yeah.
I try to even remove those terms. I try to say kid. I say my younger athletes.
Okay.
Because I want them to understand, like, I don't look at you as like lesser. You just don't have as many years around as I do.
Sure.
And that's okay. So just building that is super important.
Okay. So training youth athletes, I would imagine, because you also have the parent aspect to manage and to deal with. You have some parents that are, hey, I trust you implicitly, you know what you're doing, and do the right thing for my daughter or son.
Yeah.
And then you have the other ones who can be a bit more involved.
Hands-on is the
Yep.
term I like to use.
Okay,
Yeah.
hands-on. So I would imagine that because of that aspect, that you have to really continue to progress in your education of training youth athletes. And we both know as coaches that the knowledge progresses every day. We're learning more and more about how to push the limits of the human body every single day. So, how much time do you say that you spend, researching, continuing your education on, this sort of, youth athlete, path that you've gone down?
Yeah. So it comes in chunks very often. I'll go through certifications or things like that, but I go down rabbit holes where I catch a snippet of something, and I'm the kind of person, and I think this is true for a lot of like really good coaches out there, just teachers, whatever. I see something, I hear someone say something. My first question is always why, why. So I start to research, and I'm not just the kind of person who's like, I'm not just going to go on YouTube and there's an expert out there and be like, oh, don't, whatever they say, they're on YouTube. They clearly know what they're talking about.
Yeah, except we actually
Except for us,
Yeah, we
yes.
do.
No, challenge everything. Always challenge even whatever I say. But I read research articles. I read studies. I go and see what other experts in the field are doing. There's so much great knowledge out there. But I mean, I spend at least between reading researching and applying things, I'd say at least 1 hour a week just dedicated to that, and
Yeah.
it may be 10 minutes here, 20 minutes here, 3 hours on this day. But it all kind of varies. But at least a couple hours every week.
That's awesome.
The thing is, like, if you're not growing, you're not helping. And there's just so much more coming.
I think that's a really lost aspect of coaching. And one of the most important parts of coaching is to constantly push the boundaries of your own knowledge. Because if you stay stuck in what we did as kids, well,
Yeah.
what we did as kids is not the way we do things now. And I see a lot of coaches that are in the powerlifting world or, um, in the baseball world, which is where I came from. Uh, they're doing the same things that they did decades ago, and it really didn't work then.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not working now.
Yeah.
And athletes today, um, younger athletes today, are so far beyond where like our generation was. My oldest daughter just graduated college, and whenever I would go to visit her, I'd be around these other baseball players, and I mean they're giants, and they're super strong and super fast. I'm like, man, where do these kids come from?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would imagine that expanding that education on youth, training has to be definitely one of the main parts of your job.
Yeah.
So if you were to break down the three most important parts of you know a young athlete's training, it could be nutrition, it could be specific movements, it could be training consistency, whatever it is. What do you think is the three most important things for a youth athlete to focus on?
I think the most important things for youth athletes to focus on is one going to be consistency. That's the biggest thing that I see is kids think that because I worked out this one time, I'm going to be better. And they don't realize that, I use the analogy of building a house. You need brick by brick. You get a practice, you get a brick. You go through a game, you get a brick. You go through a workout, you get a brick. How many bricks do you have at the end of your year? You have enough to build a foundation for a good house. Or do you just have enough bricks for a wall? Like how much are you building every single year? So staying consistent has got to be part of it.
Okay.
I think training in general, and I don't want to knock. I do sports specific stuff as well. But that's one of the big buzzwords that you hear all the time. Yeah. So I use the term sports specific when I talk about coaching kids all the time because some movements are different than others.
Sure.
But some kids get so hyper focused and some coaches are so hyper focused on the same thing over and over and over. Baseball players. I train a lot of my athletes the same. The two exceptions that I have are going to be my quarterbacks and my baseball pitchers.
Okay.
Because of the shoulders
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff. And when kids are just training, they just, I'm pitching and I'm throwing 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 and I'm throwing. And the next day he goes to practice. And what's he doing in practice? Throwing. Then he's got me, and he's coming in here, and I'm asking, hey, what have you done this week? Oh, I played baseball. What did you do? I had a tournament. How many innings did you pitch? This many. How many pitches did you throw? I don't think so. It was your arm tired at the end of the day. So I think being able to provide and understand that building athleticism in kids spans all sports and activities. Every sport you're going to have to be able to run. You're going to have to be able to rotate. You're going to have to be able to squat and bend your knees and be able to balance. But I think just generalizing sports training is extremely important. It also helps with injury prevention. If you only move in one plane of motion over and over and over again, and you never train in the others, it's when you go into the other, you move quickly or sharply, and something doesn't move with you.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of it. But just general training as athletes is super important.
Okay.
The third one I'm going to say is making it. I know this may apply just for coaches, but making it enjoyable.
Okay.
Making it something that the kids want to do. There are a few kids out there who are going to show up every single day and give you everything you got if they hate what's going
You growing up.
Yeah, me growing up, going to the weight room, man. I hated going to the weight room because I wasn't good at anything. And my coach, man, no disrespect to a lot of the coaches out there, but football coaches aren't weight training coaches.
Right.
Some of them go through certifications, and that's great. But that just because you're a football coach doesn't mean you're a good weight training coach. I was never taught how to do anything. It was, hey, the seniors are in there, go lift with the seniors. As a freshman, I was 230 pounds as a freshman.
Yeah.
The seniors were not kind to me as the new kid because they're like, oh, this kid's big. Let's make it as miserable as possible for him.
Sure.
So that's what happened. But sorry, I went off on a tangent. But making it enjoyable, because the more kids are able to enjoy what's going on, you get that buy. You get more buy-in. You get more effort. The more effort you get, the more progression you get. And it's such a different thing when a kid looks forward to training or working with you, and they may be coming in, dragging their feet, sliding their Crocs across the floor, and you're like, come on, man, cleats on, let's get it going.
Yeah.
They know once the cleats are on, like it's good, and this is going to help me because coach knows what he's doing. He's got my best interest at heart. And this may not be fun, but guess what? Being on the field is fun.
Yeah.
Winning is fun. Being stronger is fun. So making it somewhat enjoyable for the athlete is important.
That's super cool. So creating enjoyment, in a youth athlete, I think that really develops for some, for most, really develops as they get a bit older and start to understand, what this can do for their sports career. So kind of leads into the question. There's been decades of debate over when they should start. You've got the old school thinking, well, their joints, their growth plates, their bones aren't ready for it until they're 12 or 13, and that's the way it was with us growing up because that was the knowledge at the time.
Yeah, didn't want to stunt your growth.
Correct.
Start lifting too early. Yeah,
that was the knowledge at the time. And that is progressed a little bit younger, but then you have coaches that are really on the cutting edge of training who are saying, no, we have to get in here earlier. We can develop that base of fitness earlier. What is your thought? When do you think, you are an expert in, youth athletic training. What do you think is a good starting age?
So this is a loaded question.
It is.
This is tough because I don't think it's ever too early for a kid to start training in sport. I think kids should play sports at a very early age. I think it's a great thing if they want to. Again, the enjoyability factor. I think from working with someone like me or going to see a coach, barring, as long as there's not an injury or they're trying to overcome some kind of any issue that may be very serious and require specific attention, I like to say around middle school is a good time. And this, again, all depends on the kid. I've worked with some kids who are in sixth grade, can handle a training session one-on-one because people forget how intense one-on-one training is. They don't realize that, oh, well, my kid goes through a 90-minute practice 3 days a week. He can handle, well, there are 20 to 40 kids at that practice.
There's no hiding one-on-one.
Exactly. It's me and you, man. It's me and you. And we're going the whole time. So I think that's around that age where I start to see kids. Some can hang for 60 minutes and some cannot. And the fact that this costs money, I tell people like this is not an inexpensive thing.
It's expensive.
When you want to work with a specialist or somebody who does this professionally, if you want to spend your money to have probably the most expensive babysitter you're going to get, I can bring your kid out here. We can kick balls around cones and we can do games. We can do stuff like that. But there's nothing that he or she is getting from me that they wouldn't get at a camp at the YMCA.
Yeah.
At a certain point, once the kid is able to, one, physically hang for 60 minutes to work out or exercise or move, and two, just mentally ready to stay engaged one-on-one, which is very difficult for a lot of young people. So I see normally I tell people, I'm like, hey, middle school, 6th to 8th grade is when I think it's a good time to start working with a coach.
Okay. And does that, when you say working with a coach, working with somebody like you, are we talking about, all right, middle school, we have the potential to, weight train a little bit, or middle school, we're doing body weight movements? Because, I am not the youth athletic expert. The way I would look at it from a logical standpoint is that, well, if they're moving their own body weight all day, then body weight movements, you know, would be okay maybe at an earlier age. But what do you think about that? So in that middle school sort of time frame that you got, is that are you talking about, being under a barbell? Are you talking about body weight movements? Because you have a lot of parents with great intentions, who are pushing their kids to work out, and they don't have a lot of direction on where do I start, so they're guessing. So are we talking training? Are we talking body weight? What are we doing?
I start all my youth athletes with body weight stuff.
Okay.
If you can't control your body and you're not strong enough to push and pull and move your body, we shouldn't be worrying about weights at that point in time. In a traditional, back in the day when we were coming up the lifts, it was your squat, bench, deadlift, press.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we did in the weight room. I still remember the posters on the wall, and those are all great exercises. But there are a lot of other things that we can do to build up to versions of those. I honestly, with a lot of my youth athletes, a lot of my athletes in general, unless I know they're going to a high school or a college that's going to require them to power clean, deadlift with an Olympic bar, I really don't train those movements.
Okay.
That's something I kind of stay away from, honestly, because I feel like the bar is an awesome tool, but it's a bit antiquated for what I'm trying to do with a lot of my guys.
Sure.
But I understand there are a lot of coaches out there like, no, you're going to come in here, you're going to do heavy power cleans, and I want them ready to do that. I want them to know how to do that. So like I will work that kind of stuff in there.
To teach it.
Exactly.
Sure.
But I say until they can control their bodies, I'm not going to start adding a ton of external stimulus to what they have going on.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of pushback from parents. But when is he going to start benching? When he can do push-ups.
Yeah.
Once he can do push-ups, we can start adding more weight.
Yeah.
And also, do they need to do push? Why does your kid need to bench?
Why do they need to bench press?
Why does he need to bench? Like, what's
Sure.
the point in that? The only exception, I will sometimes get my younger guys with weights like med balls, things like that, if they're preparing for a contact sport.
Okay.
Anything that requires their body to give or receive impact. So football, lacrosse, wrestling, those kinds of things, just to get their body used to that kind of stress. But I will start with the younger guys. It's got to be body weight first, body control, before we start adding anything. The other.
All right. I like the way you put a barbell as a tool, because you're right. A lot of, circling back to sort of the old school way of thinking, old school coaching is always, like you said, well, when's he going to get under a bar? A bar is a tool.
Yeah.
And a bar is a tool that can be implemented into their training, but doesn't have to be the cornerstone, and probably shouldn't be the cornerstone of their training. I love the way you put that. So when you select exercises for youth athletes, is this solely based on the individual, or do you have blanket movements that you can apply to everybody in addition to their individual exercises? Because I know that as adults, we pretty much all have weak hamstrings.
Yeah.
This is something that we can constantly work on for all of us. Is the youth training in that same direction where you have some blanket movements, or is it all based on the individual?
So I do two kinds of training. So I do work with individual athletes, and then I also run team trainings as well.
Okay.
Where I'll work with an entire team or a program. So the football team, I'm starting back up with the lacrosse program next week, actually, how we do field work. So there are definitely exercises that I like to do depending on the situation. If I have a young athlete one-on-one, we're going to go over movements. We start with movements versus starting with exercises. So I'm going to teach them how to squat. I'm going to teach them how to hinge, teach them how to press. I'm going to teach them how to lunge, and they're going to start carrying. That's where I start with my younger individual athletes.
Okay.
Unfortunately, when you've got a group of 40 to 60 kids at a time, you're not going to be able to do all that kind of stuff. The big things I focus on, like you said, as adults, we all have weak hamstrings. no one trains hamstrings enough. Like it blows my mind how many just normal folks in the gym will go in. I'm gonna do some chest and some back. I'm gonna hit the quads. What about your hamstrings? What about your glutes? What about your calves? Like, oh, I did calf raises. Like,
Yeah.
okay, cool,
Yeah,
man.
they pull a hamstring next
Yeah, they
week.
pull a
Yeah.
hamstring. Like, oh, my back hurts. I don't know why
Yeah.
my back hurts. There's nothing to support that thing, man.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of post chain work with my younger athletes. So
Okay.
you'll see us doing a lot of glute bridges. We'll be doing farmers walks with, walking on our toes, walking calf raises, hamstring bridge, hamstring walkout, those kinds of things. Just making sure that stuff is built up, because that's where you see a lot of kids get hurt. It's just things. The knee connects a lot of different muscles, and we want to take care of those muscles that support the healthy function.
So I think that's one of the biggest aspects of adult, um, you know, if you want to call it strength training, athletic training,
Yeah.
is the fact that strength prevents injury. There are studies that show 90% of all Division I athletic injuries could have been prevented by strength. Um, and I think that is something that a lot of people don't understand. So do you look at any of your coaching from that aspect to say, okay, well, part of why we're getting strong, or a big reason why we're getting strong, is so you don't end up, injured, down, out, surgery? Is that a driving force for your programming?
Absolutely. That's one of the things I was just telling a kid last night. It's like, hey, I want you to be good. I want you to get faster and strong, but I want you to do it for a long, long, long time. I'm not just looking at what you're going to do tomorrow. I'm looking at how we're going to train your body to move and the things you're going to understand and learn in here that you're going to take not just from here, but he's in middle school, what you're going to do in high school, what you're going to do in college, if that's what you want to do, and anything after that. One thing that I think people forget, and they get a coach, I want you to work with my son or my daughter on strength training. Okay, I just want to be real with you. Strength and conditioning isn't going to make your kid a better football player or lacrosse player or a baseball player. It will make them stronger. It may make them faster. It's the biggest thing is we're going to prevent injuries. We're going to give them the tools. I can't say your kid's going to be a good football player. We all know everyone that grew up playing sports always had that one person on the team. You're like, that person looks the part. They're big, they're strong, they're fast, and they were just a bum.
Yeah.
They're like, how are you so bad at this sport? You are built for it. How are you so terrible?
Yeah.
Some people, like, it's just not for you.
Sure.
They may be strong as an ox, but if you can't move, you just can't connect the dots to be a good football player, baseball player, lacrosse player, basketball, whatever sport it is, tennis, soccer, golf, isn't going to happen.
Sure.
So I have to remind parents sometimes, like, hey, I'm not making them, by doing this, I'm not guaranteeing that they're going to be a better linebacker or a better receiver. They'll be faster. The thing is, we're going to provide them the tools, the strength, the mobility, the healthy muscles to keep them on the field longer. That stuff's going to come from years and years of practice and then getting better. And like I do sports specific stuff where I work with kids for quarterback coaching,
Yeah.
or linebacker work, tight end, like those kinds of things. And that's a different kind of focus because that's more skill. And people forget they're two different things. Strength and conditioning is not the same as skill or position work. They will help. One will support the other, but it's not going to completely change the kid's game. And I think a lot of people.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's super important for parents and team coaches to hear.
Yeah.
Just because you're making them better on the field is not going to make them better in the weight room.
Right.
The weight room is not necessarily going to make their sport specific skills on the field better. Yeah, I love that.